we'll take care of it then.
So we
Just
will
got the
address it.
18.
So folks here who want to talk about solar, we have a meeting scheduled, almost scheduled at HDC. I've talked with HDC. We will be having a joint meeting with the HDC to talk about solar panels. That will not be tonight. So if you're here to talk about solar panels, it's not, all we're going to talk about is a date to talk about it. And we will be talking about it very seriously. We will dig into it in depth. Tonight is electric vehicle chargers. So I asked Peter to circulate the Methuen example, not because Methuen is the be-all and the end-all, but they've gotten a little bit more into it than we have. We also have the staff markup from what came from council with some suggestions. And I made a whole bunch of notes, but rather than lead off with that, I thought hear what other board members have to say. I've had a request from the Sustainability Committee to also give us some additional input, and I know they meet at 6:30. So given that, if I gave you guys 10 minutes now, would that work? Okay, why don't we hear from the sustainability folks, whoever. Right. I think that mic,
These mics will work.
if the light's on, I think the mic's working,
Yeah.
as you know.
Light is on. Good evening, and thank you, Josh Denton, both the City Council rep on the Sustainability Committee and the City Councilor who drafted the amendment in front of you. We had sent it to the Planning Board almost 2 years ago now, but I'd like to touch upon a couple things in it, but first, big picture. As you know, there are more and more people seeking to purchase electric vehicles, and that's highly dependent on if people feel comfortable that they'll be able to charge their vehicles. There's different type of chargers out there. Level 1 charger, for those who don't know, essentially you just plug it into a wall socket. This is oversimplification. Level 2 charges in about 8 to 12 hours. That's what most people have at their homes. That's what most EV chargers are around Portsmouth. The city of Portsmouth has several EV chargers. And most EV chargers have 2 ports, so there's one down in the lower lot, which opened several years ago. There is at least one in the High Hanover garage, and then there are 3 in the Foundry Place garage, and there's also one that should be going in soon at the Bridge Street lot at the lower level where you have the big electric, I'll just call it transformer box. But that's all public. The ordinance in front of you is for private, whether people want it in their homes or if businesses want to do them. When it comes to businesses wanting to do EV charging, there was, I don't know if anyone will recall this, but Volkswagen, probably about 5-6 years ago, they got slammed for cheating on their vehicle emission standards. They were forced to create an escrow of, I believe it's $2 million. I don't know if it's $2 billion or $2 million. It's in my phone. And that money was solely supposed to go towards electric vehicle charging stations throughout the country. I believe it's Electrify America is the organization who essentially is a subsidiary of Volkswagen who's going around installing those. Back in 2017, they came to the city of Portsmouth and they were going to put 5 level 3 fast chargers. It's a third type of charger. They usually take about 30 minutes to charge an electric vehicle. There's currently none in Portsmouth. They were going to put 5 in at the Walmarts. The issue they encountered when they went to the city, my understanding is the electric box, the transformer, was going to take up about 2 to 3 parking spaces, and that was too much space it was going to take up under the city's, their current rules, so it wasn't going anywhere. Instead, those 5 level 3 fast chargers went to Seabrook. That's why there's lots of people in Portsmouth who are able to afford EV vehicles, drive to Seabrook to get their vehicle charged in about 30 minutes versus letting it charge 8 to 10 hours in their garage or at a public EV station. Thankfully, Electrify America is putting more EV fast chargers in Kittery soon over at the wherever the Simon Mall is near the Kittery train close by the outlets. Those there are all are accessory electric vehicle chargers, which this addresses. This ordinance also addresses primary use electric vehicle charging. So essentially, if a business wanted to do just that, just have electrical vehicle charging stations, they could under this ordinance. There's been talk of such a business opening up in Rochester. I think they're shooting for 6 level 3 chargers. However, I don't think the business model was flushed out enough. They don't have the same amount of funds as other organizations do to necessarily make it work. I guess a different way to say that is, if you think of a typical gas station, they make their money either off of the convenience store, or they make most of their money off of the auto repair shop that's there. So the gas itself is typically just an accessory use. What they were trying to do in Rochester would be the primary use, and that's what's in this ordinance, both types. It's for where can they go residentially, level 1, level 2, level 3, where can they go for businesses, and where can they be an accessory, and where can they be a primary use. And so that's one over the world. One thing I often say is that electric vehicles aren't for everybody. So just because you can afford an electrical vehicle, I would simply encourage you to think twice if you're going to drive enough to offset the amount of energy it takes to create it. Someone like myself who only drives taking my dogs places these days, there's no point in me getting an electric vehicle because I don't drive enough. So electric vehicles are great. This will help encourage people who want to install electric vehicle chargers, and I welcome any and all feedback that you have for this to go back to the council.
Thank you. I hadn't expected Q&A, but if anybody has any questions for Josh?
Well, not for Josh, but just in general. So the specific language that we are supposed to be looking at, I'm on the city's website under tonight's agenda. Am I looking at the most?
Speak into the mic, Joe.
I'm so sorry. We've received some additional information. Does the city's website have the most current information for us to be looking at?
Yes,
Okay.
the original ordinance is the EV zoning ordinance link, and then staff met probably in November when this was originally sent out to you all.
In red, the staff
And then
edits.
you have, yep.
Great. Thank you very much.
And then there's been a bunch of things since with the public comment, and
Right.
also some other like the Methuen document that I mentioned earlier that we should have. That's on the website too, right?
It's not on the website, but it was
It was
emailed.
emailed out.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes, Jim?
Councilor Denton, just reviewing level 1 and level 2 again. Level 1 is like a socket, just the standard, and level 2 is like a dryer or an oven, 3-prong. Is that kind of what, like a 220 volt? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's
Okay.
correct. And so that gets us to level 3, which is takes massive
Correct.
transformer and infrastructure for those to work.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm just curious about the planning department's selection of the zones where level 3 is allowed.
So if I guess those were my selections.
Okay.
And that was me looking at a map, knowing this ordinance was going to go to the planning board, so people with more know-it-all than myself could make better recommendations than
Okay.
what I came up with.
I wanted to talk about that, so I think we'll need to bring a map up and go through that. So, that's definitely something we need to discuss to get back to council on.
But your idea was based on non-technical planning, more from a convenience and what made sense to a user. Is that right?
Correct. It's
Okay.
what made sense to a user and what made sense to a layperson, not a professional planning person.
Cool. That's, makes sense.
Yes,
Thank you.
Joe?
So of course, the level 3 chargers themselves, we've all seen examples of them. Is there current language in the ordinance that requires the installation of them to go before the HDC? Because they are structures, they're not exempt, they're internally illuminated, there's advertising on them. Is
If
there
it was in the
any-
historic district, it would be, yeah, it would have to go to the
It's
HDC.
considered a structure, yeah, okay. And we currently have that language, and we're not proposing changing that.
We haven't defined levels 1, 2, and 3 chargers, but the definition of a service station includes selling electricity.
Okay.
So if you wanted to put a level 3 service station, I'm not sure what to call it,
Yeah.
but let's call it that, on Islington.
Yeah.
That's in the HDC, that's in the historic district, so that would be subject to HDC review.
Great, thank you.
Bill, I think Bill had his hand up.
So I'd like to understand the basic strategy of where these go and where they don't go, and what the factors are that would make us say no. Is it an interaction with housing? I mean, there are some housing areas that allow them and some do not.
I think, I don't want to put Counselor Denton on the spot on some of these questions. These are some technical issues that I've done some research on, I think the staff's done some research on, and I think some members have done some research on, and that's why they sent it to us, for us to talk about things like that. So I'm not going to ask you to get into the weeds on, I mean, unless you want to, but,
The only thing I will say to that is I'll just use it as an opportunity to say one benefit of this is not just for the homeowners, it's for tenants who rent, because most renters have no access to electric vehicle charging stations that aren't public, because there's very little incentive for landlords to install them. And while this isn't an incentive, the easier it is for a property owner to install an EV charger, the more likely it is for renters to have access to it. So I just use that opportunity to give you that answer.
okay. Yes, Jim?
I don't know if this is for the counselor or Peters. Could you review the difference again between primary use and auxiliary? I know the counselor mentioned the gasoline analogy with.
I can explain that. I
Okay.
think, did anybody else from sustainability want to have a quick, anything that wasn't mentioned?
I just wanted to thank everybody for working on it. I'm Effie Malley, I'm on the Sustainability Committee, and as you know, the Climate Action Plan is
You got to be at a microphone,
Speak
sorry.
to the microphone.
the Climate Action Plan is coming out next month, and transportation is one of our key areas where we have to look at reducing greenhouse gases. So EVs play a crucial role in that. I have owned an EV for 5 years, and it's really inconvenient, time-consuming, out of the way to drive to Seabrook. And it just seems it would be, this group has a big responsibility right now to move this along and help all the electric vehicle owners that have been driving to Rochester or Seabrook to charge in an expedient way. At home, we have just a level 1 charger. We live in the South End. We don't have a garage. So that takes hours to charge the car. So I really appreciate your work on this, and I'm sure you have some good examples to look at and some leadership here, so I appreciate that.
Just for a clarification, the one that we've been pointed to is the one in Kittery, and so I've gone up and looked at the one in Kittery. Is Seabrook different than Kittery?
Yes, we have a Tesla, and it's a Tesla supercharger that's available in Seabrook, and other models can use the Tesla supercharger now. The one in Kittery is Electrify America, what Josh referred to, Councilor Denton referred to. We don't have the adapter to use that at this point, but we will in the future, trying to keep up with the technology.
How much is the adapter?
Under $100. We haven't bought it yet, so I'm not sure exactly.
All right, we've got an ordinance to talk about, and we're on it. It's not going to sit for 2 years, it's not going to sit for 6 months.
Thank you,
We're going to
everyone.
get this back to
Thank you.
council.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yes, Joe?
Could I just ask,
Microphone?
microphone.
Microphones?
Can't sit that far back.
We're going to get you a lapel mic.
the language that has been striked out, can we talk about why we've struck it out, the reasoning and how we might
Sure.
compensate in another way?
Yes, just quickly, principal and accessory uses. People understand, well, I'm going to assume you don't understand it. Principal use is what is supposed to be the primary use of a piece of property. It is the most significant use of the property that gets the principal approval from a planning board if that's required, or just getting a building permit. In my experience with gasoline stations, what Councilor Denton mentioned, I've seen, and I have clients who have the reverse situation. Most of their money comes from the gas. So it's not necessarily the revenue stream. It's usually, from a land use perspective, what takes up the most of the site and what generates the most activity. So if you have a part of a property that might have a large building, but it's a warehouse that hardly gets used, and you've got something really active up front that has trucks passing in and out, day in and day out, like 500 trucks a day or something, the more active use would be considered more principal than the more passive use to the back. Coming back to something we did last year, accessory dwelling unit, accessory, that's why it's called an accessory dwelling unit, because you have the principal use, which is the big house, the accessory use, which is the smaller house, which has less impact on the neighborhood. It's a smaller use on the property. So when we look at something that's listed in the chart for discussion as an accessory use, that would mean, for level 1, for example, you put a couple of plugs in your garage to plug your car in, that's total accessory use. It's just, and shouldn't, in my opinion, need any permits other than getting the electricity part of it right and getting the electrical codes right. Same thing with level 2. It's basically the same thing as hooking up a dryer, as somebody said. It's just stepping up from 120 to 240. Now, the level 3s I think we need to talk about, but that's separate. So if you have any questions about accessory versus principal, that's the 30,000-foot view of the difference between the two. Related to that is the difference between special exception, conditional use permit, and permitted uses versus not permitted uses. But we can get to that.
I understand, just to follow up on my question, sorry. I understand the difference between accessory and principal. I'm just wondering why, for example, section 10.870, completely striking all of that language. It's not that I disagree with striking it. I don't understand why it was struck. That's all.
Sure. So the 10.8.70
Yeah.
about there shall be no more than 2 40-foot wide curb cuts or access points on each abutting street. Currently, you're allowed to have one driveway per lot. So in our site plan regs and ordinance, so having 2 requires, especially if they're new, I mean, if they're existing, they're pre-existing, but you cannot have 2 new ones without getting a variance. So we thought that was contradictory. And then the enforcement of no vehicles in operative condition shall remain on the site for more than 14 days. Just thought that might be an enforcement issue. How are we going to enforce that? I mean, I guess.
In my opinion, there's more than just those small things to
Right.
talk about here, especially when we get to level 3 as a principal use.
Great. Thank you.
But I'd like to hear other folks. Yes.
I just wanted to add to the conversation that when we were talking about accessory use, we did actually, this planning board, well, a previous planning board, I can't remember who was here and who wasn't, so bear with me.
The planning board.
Yeah, the planning board. The new common man stop that's across from Water Country, we did approve that with several electric chargers in the back, and I can't remember what level they were. Were they
I can't
level
remember
3?
either, but I don't know that they were level 3 because they're just.
They
probably-
had big.
They didn't know, but they were hoping they would be
Right.
level 3.
So, we are already approving things like this. Unfortunately, something like that still hasn't gotten built, and it's been a while, so makes
They're
you,
very close to getting a building permit.
it's really good to hear.
I can follow up on that.
But that's a great location to put when we start to talk about a level 3 charger, because there's a bunch of woods behind there and it's really far away from anyone who actually lives there. It's all businesses. So, and they're putting it in the back of the lot,
That was
up
about 6
against the
months ago, I
wetlands.
remember that, yeah.
6 months, feels like more like
More
a
than
year,
that?
but
I think it was more than that, but also the hospital parking lot that we approved that expansion, there are designated locations there as well.
well.
And I don't think they knew what they were going to put there, but they were going to put some there.
something there.
And the
I-
project last week had 3 or 4.
Right. I just think we need to be careful when we're changing our zoning to make sure, especially when we're talking about level 3, those could be very disruptive to a residential property. Or, right. So you don't want to approve the 3 apartment buildings that we just approved and have a level 3 charger like right outside their window or somewhere there. So because we are mixing residences and businesses now, I think that it takes a deeper thought as far as where we're going to put things. And
Well, I want to follow
my
on what
caution.
Joe's questions on these strikeouts. I mean, I thank you for understanding that, two driveways, but we have a dead vehicle ordinance in this city for residents. You can't have a dead vehicle in your
Right.
driveway.
That's not registered or.
Right. So why did we take it out of here?
These are business uses, right? These aren't
So
residential.
they would enforce it rather than, right? I
Right.
see.
These are businesses, not residences that we're talking about.
I think what
When we're
was,
talking
what
about a
was,
principal use.
what was struck was an addition that,
Oh, I'm sorry, this is out of Keys.
right,
Got it.
so.
Well,
I missed the page break. Right?
Well,
But it
the
also-
section 10, part that was struck about no vehicles, that was in our ordinance. I do have a comment about the P section.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
it would help me, and I don't know if it would help the board, but like looking at the staff edits, if we were to just like maybe start at the top and work through it. It seems like right now we're kind of jumping down to what was struck out, but, we might be able to just get through a piece and agree and then ultimately get to the end.
I think that's a laudable goal and a rational way to go. I think there's more, we'll see what the board feels. I think there's a few more things to talk about, but something that also would help is the zoning map. I think anybody here who can keep all those zones in their head, more power to you.
Where they are is the harder part.
And we're also changing some of those, as we know. Is that not been? have you got a
It's,
chance to update it?
Yep, on February
It's
15th.
coming to the planning board in February.
I know that, but
Yep,
we're working on the map.
Yep. It's a series of maps, but just,
You don't have one overall that's been updated yet?
no.
Okay.
I mean, I'm looking at
Jim.
the very top 11.9 principal use. We haven't defined principal use as level 1, 2, or 3. Are we just assuming the principal use that
The way
could
the way that's worded is a principal, just by saying electric vehicle charging is a principal use, that would be levels 1, 2, or 3. So, and I have some issues with that, because especially for level 3.
I have some issues as well.
Exactly.
I think there needs to be different uses for different levels.
And if you look at our existing ordinance for service stations and where they're permitted, and that's the comment I made about special exception. Right now, you need a special exception in certain zones to get a service station, and service stations can include electric vehicle charging.
Right, and that's only allowed in 4 zoning districts by special exception. And everywhere else, it's not permitted. So someone could come in today and put in a level 3 charging station as a principal use in one of those zoning districts, but they'd require a special exception.
Is Jim, you've had your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to follow up with what Paul had to say. Conceptually, I could only see A charging station for principal use would likely be a level 3. If they're making all their money off of electricity, you'd think it would just be, and the accessories would likely be 1 and 2. Is
Yeah.
that fair to say?
Yeah, and I discussed that with Counselor Denton before the meeting. I don't see levels 1 and 2 as a principal use. That would be
Right, yeah.
strange.
It's not possible, you have to sit there all day.
It would be a very, I don't know that we'd want a principal use that was just level 1 and 2. That would just be a parking lot with a bunch of plugs in it.
Exactly.
Sitting there a long time.
That's not turning over parking.
It's a fading technology, right? As it
Yeah.
advances, eventually,
Yeah,
you can't buy an 8-track anymore.
no.
So if we think of electric vehicle charging stations as a principal use, I think I have a hard time having them permitted in anywhere where we allow residential buildings without
Exactly.
somebody looking at it.
Exactly.
So conditional use permits in G1, G2, CD4L2, and MRB, I think would be a necessity for me.
Wait,
There, as Peter said, right now you've got GB, G1,
G2, BCD4W.
industrial, and BCD4 West as the 4, right?
Yep, correct.
Those are the 4 zones right now you can put a service station by special exception. Now, special exception, I know Paul knows because he was on the ZBA in Rochester, to do a project with the requires a special exception, you'd come here for site plan review, but you go to zoning board for a special exception. A special exception is a provision in the ordinance that means you are permitted to do it, provided you meet these certain criteria. More recently, the legislature gave planning boards the ability to do the same thing under conditional use permit that we do all the time. So there's a split thought on it. Some people feel it's better for the applicants to come to one board and deal with, one group of people with one ordinance. Other people think it's probably good to have, and I'm not advocating either way, other people think that it's good to have the planning board look at it with one set of eyes and the Board of Adjustment to look at it with a different set of eyes. Those are the two schools of thought. So,
My thoughts on that, not that I don't have many thoughts, but special exceptions are a much smaller hurdle there than like getting a variance. So when you're thinking ZBA, a special exception doesn't have a very high hurdle where a variance does. So a conditional use permit would probably be a better way to go. I would prefer over a special exception, but that's just me.
But the
Well,
way we use conditional use permits currently is you give up something to get something, so.
those are the conditions. So that's what's missing in the current draft. If you
Right.
want to go conditional use permit, then you have
We
to
need
do the
more.
conditions.
Exactly.
If you want to go special exception, you have to list the criteria by which you can get the special exception. So just to clarify what Councilor Moreau said, a variance is not permitted, and you have to show why your property is different than other properties in the zone. It's a high hurdle, and there's lots of litigation about it. So that's a whole other ball of wax. A special exception is you are permitted. It's very much like a conditional use permit, except you don't get it from the planning board. So that's the big difference.
5 conditions, like hardship, like Paul said, I mean,
That's
That's
a
a
variance.
variance.
That's a variance.
exactly. No, that's like what I meant.
And somebody could could apply for a variance to put a level 3 charging station inside an apartment building, I suppose. That would be kind of weird, but,
It'd be really weird.
Dangerous, weird.
I
loud,
wouldn't advise making that
expensive.
application.
No one's going to live there.
So I thought it was informative. Again, the consistency thing, if we're going to look at permitting more level 3 principal uses, we might want to think about more service stations because functionally they're very similar.
And I'm
They
fine
look
with
the
that.
same.
Yeah. But we have a service station right in my neighborhood. And if you put one there 2 feet away from a residential district, I think there has to be some sort of buffer.
Well, that could be a conditional use criteria, because I did, from what I've learned in the last 2 weeks, these things, they do hum. The transformers make
Constantly.
noise. And-
Transformers hum. And
Yes,
To
always.
have a DC fast charge, there's,
Is a
And
big
some of the
hummer.
photos that were sent today, you saw the size of the box behind those units. I mean, this is a significant piece of infrastructure. a level 3.
I think that was clear when he said 3 parking spaces. That gives you a real visual of how big they would need the transformer for these
Oh,
things. up.
totally. Yeah,
What about
pictures.
the Tesla dealer that's going in, or the showroom, or whatever it is? Are they gonna have 2 fast chargers out front?
They're putting one in the parking lot, if I remember correctly.
They're gonna have 2
Two
spaces,
spaces
so
in the parking lot.
they didn't specify.
They didn't say, yeah.
They didn't say what level.
They didn't
just said
show a
2
big,
spaces.
they didn't show a big box.
Right,
Yeah, I would
right.
wonder, how,
How are they doing that? I'm guessing it's got to be like a level 2.
put the transformer around back, and that's a lot of conduit.
Well, knowing how long that plaza's been there, you can guarantee the infrastructure, the electrical power and infrastructure is not adequate.
Not there. Yeah.
It's not there.
Right, they got to upgrade for those chargers.
But are they gonna run the improved lines under the parking lot, through the building? I mean,
I just don't know how they could do it
I don't-
without level 3.
exactly. That's my point. I
Just the
can't see a
cars
level
sitting
3
out there
going there,
24
period.
hours to-
Well, just to help advance this discussion, I'm going to make a suggestion. So levels 1 and 2, I don't see those as a principal use anywhere. I don't think there's a reason for that to be in the ordinance. And as
Agreed.
accessory uses, I don't see them as a problem anywhere either. So if we just take,
I think they're already covered. And-
well,
and
we're
we-
just
we permit-
clarifying.
right, right,
clarifying
right,
that
As
which
accessory
exists,
use.
basically. So if we said levels 1 and 2 could go anywhere as an accessory use and nowhere as a principal use, that's part of our workload done, if you folks are in agreement.
I think that's
So we
at
would
least,
change 11.9 on that.
To be a level 3.
Level,
that's half the work. 1 and 2 are fine anywhere, just like you said.
Yeah.
Now we gotta deal with level 3.
It's really just level 3.
And why are we assuming, why wouldn't we assume that housing developments would want level 3 chargers? And in some I mean, I don't think it's so outlandish, when you consider some of the homes that are going up in the area, you might find developments that want a level 3 charger in their development. If we continue to see, it's very questionable now if you follow, current events, but a growth in electric vehicles, the way it's being predicted.
It's allowed as an accessory use to an apartment building, to a shopping mall. It's allowed.
It's not allowed as a business, primary use.
Correct. Principal.
Got it.
Yes,
That's
so
the
if
piece
it's already
I didn't
accessory,
understand
you
that
can put
piece.
one in. Yeah.
Well, I think we need to clarify that because I think as a project, like, let's say Weston Yard is being proposed, I'm not sure, do they have one out there? I saw a map that
think
showed one
so.
out
They have a
there.
couple of 1 or 2s.
What, yeah,
West
they have
End.
low
So
level.
if you're planning a project like that, you think about things like that. and
Yeah.
You'd cite it in a spot that's not going to cause problem with your residents. So,
Right.
it's the guy who owns the half-acre lot beside the apartment project that I'm more wondering about, and, who didn't think of it when the apartment building was being built, but now sees the economic opportunity of putting one in, and if you can be shielded or otherwise the hum issues and any other issues are taken care of, fine. But if it's going to be right under people's windows, maybe not. I sent Peter, the BBC did a segment on community in England. It was 5 years ago, so text changes every week, so there's that. But the community, I forget what they called it.
Islington. Well, Islington, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, it was
Sorry, that's
Islington. They put a whole line of them down the street, like every parking spot had one. And unfortunately, the residents didn't like it because they hummed all night and kept people awake.
When during the interview, you could hear it humming in the background.
So and I don't think those are even level 3, but again, it was 5 years ago. So I think when we get to this, I think we should have some criteria in the conditional use permit that address noise. I don't know enough tonight to know what the answer to that is, but we can figure it out.
I think when Counselor Denton spoke about the settlement money from Volkswagen, this is what's coming as a principal use. Right, this money, they're building charging infrastructure across the country. It's not necessarily for residential use, it's for the visitors to Portsmouth, people that are traveling here and are going to charge their vehicle fast while they're here so that they can get back home. That's what I envision as the principal the principal use, that this settlement money will be used to build.
I don't understand the story about
Level 3.
not being able to go in a Walmart parking lot, because that doesn't square in my brain, but
It doesn't in mine either.
I was thinking of the same thing. I mean, the perfect place would be like Whole Foods, as an example. You know, put it at the, closer to Woodbury, and if you're gonna go shop at Whole Foods, plug in.
At Walmart, you can put it right in that front parking lot.
You
Where
could.
it's not gonna bother
Nobody's
anyone.
ever out there,
there's no
except for
shortage of parking
motorhomes.
spaces at the Walmart.
Yeah.
And I've
There's
seen
too
the
much
one,
parking
the
there.
one in Seabrook, actually, some of the photos that I gave you, those are from the Seabrook.
Right.
That's where those are from. So you guys have seen what they look like. It's
Yeah.
a typical Tesla supercharger. Yes, Bill?
So I'm going to try to be sympathetic to the prospect and ask why not. One reason why not, when we talk of it as being like a gas station, it really isn't. It has the same function, but there are 4 spots, and the car's there for half an hour at least. So you don't have a lot of in and out traffic, and you don't have a store attached to it. So it's a lot less intrusive than thinking of a gas station next door to you. It's a small sample, but at least the one in Kittery makes no noise. I stood there next to a woman who was charging for 15 minutes and could hear nothing. There's a very large box behind it, which is obtrusive, and whatever building code stuff we need to think about for that is good. But her comment was that she stops in a couple places in Maine and a couple places in New Hampshire, and the one in Kittery is the sound is the same as all the others. One in Kennebunk. So I'd like to, if part of the reason that we're thinking negatively about this is the noise, I'd like to see if we could really lock down the question of whether the current technology is noise offensive. And if it's not, then we need to think of it kind of as a business, or what kind of activity you'd want with a few cars coming every now and then and parking for half an hour to an hour, and what the people are going to do who are in those cars. So, you know, it'd be nice to have them in shopping centers or places where they have a place to go to do shopping. But I think we ought to be, if we're going to do this in a limiting way, we need to be clear on why we're limiting. The may also, I'm the old guy here, so I'd say this may be a younger people's activity. I think the people who own electric vehicles skew younger, and I think if we want to help our younger population, I think we should get a younger voice, who is a aficionado, giving a discussion as to why they need more.
Well, just to clarify, I'm not trying to limit anything, and I don't think Councilor Moreau is trying to limit it. We're trying to understand it.
Right.
So we have heard, and I have seen information online that these things, some of these at least, can make sound. Your point is well taken. If current tech is quiet, we should, that's a spec we could put in the regulation.
Right.
If you're going to be next to residential uses, you need to do X, Y, and Z. I don't know what X, Y, and Z is.
We
but
can
we
put
find out.
decibel levels. We
Yeah.
can have, if it emits so much decibel levels, and we did this around the thing regarding the ice skating rink when we approved that many years ago, is that
The compressors.
thank you, I couldn't think of the word of what it was, but we made sure that they put it behind something that would keep it from being extraordinarily loud to the neighborhood around, so, because that was one of the big, so we can do the same thing for
Yeah,
these.
I mean, we can address it. It's not the idea to keep these out and restrict them. I think it's a great idea, just if we do it responsibly, that's all. And, that's all we're trying to do here. So, yes, Paul.
Under accessory uses for level 3, are we considering prohibiting it in any of these zones? it's conditional in most and permitted and, well, in half and permitted and
Well,
the other
to
half.
clarify, what was given to us was a proposal that came from council, staff marked it up lightly, and we are free to dig in as much as we think is appropriate. So, you know, this isn't like a final draft document that you can only look at commas and, you know, semicolons. So I don't know, I think what we said earlier, one of the other is, as a principal use, level threes might be considered similar to service stations, which are allowed in 4 zones by special exception. So if we followed that logic, and you said you could put them in those 4 zones by conditional use permit, that would keep everything at this board. We come up with a criteria, one of which might be sound, and, you know, conditional use permits aren't hard. You know, again, they're allowed if you meet the conditions. So that's how that might work.
A level 3 and, you know, SRA, SRB as a conditional use. Is this are they charging for this service?
Well,
Is
that was
it a
another note I
business?
made. I don't know that level 3 is an accessory use in the residential districts. That seems like a bit of a reach to me.
I don't think they're gonna be able to afford it,
shouldn't even be
but
allowed,
if you
right?
have a 5-acre property, granted, we don't have many of these, but the farm on Beverly Hill Road, no one's, if they wanted chargers way up back on the hill, no one's gonna even know they're there, right? So I think you have to think about every district slightly differently, right? So I think it depends on the size of the property. If you have a large
Well,
property, might,
we could put in a provision on the residential areas if you had a certain size, or you could do that, or you could put a distance from the unit itself, which would create it back into a size.
or
That-
from neighbor
It could be
property
conditional
lines.
use for a conditional personal use, not as a
Correct.
business.
It's accessory use, not as business, it's accessory use to your principal home.
But that was a note I made, level 3 as an accessory use, I thought perhaps should just be accessory to other commercial uses. So in the Walmart parking lot, in the grocery store parking lot, that sort of, those are accessory uses. If I have a single-family residence on Richards Avenue, should I be allowed to put a level 3 in my front yard as an accessory use? I don't think so.
Well, you'd probably run into setback issues, you'd probably run into all kinds of things with something half the size of this room. So,
Well, if we
but then you
permitted
gotta-
it,
But then you gotta define it as a structure.
yeah, I mean,
I think to start, we could not permit in the single-family neighborhoods.
I think that's a great place to start.
I think it's a place to start and
well,
permit them in other places.
well, we got through level 1 and 2 pretty quickly. Level 3 is a principle. Let's just, we've got 4 zones right now. The service stations are allowed by special exception. So we say
They're all
those 4
business
zones,
districts.
which are business zones, we stick with that same logic. Does that make sense as
Very
principal
consistent.
Yes.
uses?
Very consistent.
I like that logic.
No brainer.
So we have to figure out the conditions,
Right.
I mean, which would be sound. So that would be principal
Screening.
use.
Perhaps.
Screening might be
Well,
one.
yeah, and I was gonna ask about that,
Distance
because they took screening away. I think screening would be a great idea. I wouldn't wanna go with, vegetative screening, because you can't do that in an asphalt parking lot. But make it look good.
Unless they did an island of some type.
Yeah, make it look better.
Yeah, that big green box behind Liz Bratter was not very aesthetic. Now, but there's some code issues with that too, because they are housing very high voltage, so they may not be able to be screened close. It might require.
From a cooling standpoint?
I hadn't planned on any public comment, but then it was lobbied on. What's the feeling of the board?
Yes.
We are learning, and if she knows what we don't,
Is that a consensus to, okay. I will give you 6 minutes.
6 minutes, I can do it.
double
that?
the usual.
Are you gonna count me passing out the paper? That's double what you usually do.
Yes.
So this is that's the,
Well, you asked.
I know I did, I should never ask. That's the rule on how loud it can be. So I actually had 2 different things. One of them is, I'm going to give to
This is
you,
multiple copies, right?
for you, yeah, there's multiple copies of it.
Oh, this is for me to pass this way.
That feedback, I think, someone has their phone, it might be you, Paul, your phone next to the
Oh,
microphone.
yeah, you can't put your phones down.
They get it back, getting the feedback? It's
Too
clicking.
much time on it.
Oh, sorry. Is
Yeah.
it just one, please?
Yeah. Sorry.
That's quiet. Those are low numbers.
You want me to stand up here or
Well, conversation's like 62
You can
decibels.
sit over there.
That's what I've been told.
Are you going to explain where these came from,
Those
the performance standards?
came right out of the ordinances.
Okay.
Peter will say, oh, I recognize those. And I believe in the letter I presented, it explains what level the people who keep track of charging stations, there was a reference to that in my original letter that I sent. Okay. I have these two things. One is 3 and one is 4, so we'll see if I can make it. My name is Elizabeth Bratter, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. You know all about electrical charging stations. I thought the only thing you can find in our ordinances right now is in Chapter 7, Article 18, and that has parking regulations. Other than that, I could not find any regulations regarding to EV. EV stations as well as solar could be added to the land use ordinances in Article 9 under special uses, and that includes wind energy. So I just thought that made sense. And when you put things into Section 9, I thought you could add any necessary considerations of installing these. Some things to think about with EV stations is, of course, abutting neighborhoods. It's one thing to have a level 1, and you can have those inside or out. Another is a level 2 or a level 3, which you already did. And you talked about that, the level 3 charging stations. Many of the charging stations are already in violation of Article 13, 10, 13, 32, 20. So that is part of your infrastructure things. Most homes have between 100 and 200 amps for their entire household use. A level 1 EV station costs about $600 without installation and needs 120 volts and 12 amps. A level 2 station costs about $7,200 without installation, needs 240 volts and 60 amps. So some of the older homes would not be able to have a level 2 station, even if you have it as a primary use. Level 3 stations cost about $50,000 without installation. They're 480 volts and they need 100 amps. The cost factor often decides whether or not the purchaser just wants to put one of these in. What's his name? Okay, I'll finish up. So the thing to think about is the infrastructure. Can Portsmouth infrastructure handle these? So you might have a neighborhood that has level 1s in it, and then somebody puts, like Islington Street is a good example. Let's say Islington Creek puts in a lot of level 1s, and then somebody puts in a level 3 in the old gas station, which is going to be a restaurant, but just as an example, it might be helpful to talk to Eversource and the DPW before doing any permitting of these all over town without considering the consequences of on the infrastructure of electricity or not. So I did go over to Kittery. It is quiet right now because it's cold. If you think about your computer, as it gets hotter, the ventilation system runs more, and that's what makes the noise. So in the summer, the EV station is louder than in the winter. They also have a thing around it. If you walk up close to it, you can hear the hum. If you walk back from it, so whatever they put around it is thing. So Kittery treats EV stations as a structure, and they have to meet all the setbacks that have to do with structures in their zoning. However, they don't regulate anything else because the state of Maine regulates it. And they look at EV stations as a power source, and EV stations must comply with all state and city electrical requirements. EV stations for public use are considered a commercial electrical use, and because the owner of the EV station is selling power to the end user and must comply with very strict standards. After talking to the New Hampshire PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, the New Hampshire Consumer Services, and the DOT, it was quickly apparent there are no New Hampshire laws that have stayed up with the technology. There are incentives, but the EV stations are pretty much unregulated in New Hampshire. Michael Moser of New Hampshire DET, Beth probably knows him, did share that they are working on DC fast charging stations along major corridors in New Hampshire. He shared that many cities are trying to put EV stations in so people can hang around while they're getting charged. And the DOT is starting a little bit later, so they got to take advantage by collaborating with other states who've already done that. One EV station for the rest stops are costing about $2,000. EV station's pretty much unregulated in New Hampshire, therefore it is important to consider putting some ordinances in place on what other cities have done perhaps, or based on regular common sense. For example, it might be helpful to have a DC fast charging station, as you discussed, close to downtown, but not necessarily in downtown due to the humming. Level 2 stations could be installed in town, but not too close to residential homes, unless they're enclosed in an insulated area. And you don't want to put them in a garage because they're going to hum and that's going to amplify the sound. So you might want to think about how far apart they are from each other, because if you have like in Islington, England, they're too close together, so that hum becomes a real annoyance. Level 1 stations could be installed in most homes, but an electrical inspection before might be helpful to know by anybody because of the fact you might not have the amperage you need in that building. You might want to consider fire requirements, which could be something like egress. The garages need to have heat detectors in them that are garage regulated, and fire extinguishers should be there that are electrical fires. Most homes do not have electrical fire extinguishers. Some other things to consider are level 1s take about 5 or 6 hours, according to what I found, to charge. Level 2s take 1 or 2 hours, and a level 3 takes 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the size of the vehicle. Some things to think about are insulated fencing and security. You don't want some kid hopping over that thing. That might not be a good thing. You want to think about lighting. Each one of those little stations comes with lights, but do you want to have more lighting on the bigger ones? You want to think about whether they're going to be internal or external. You want to know whether they're next to residential, because playgrounds we have a playground right next to the Foundry garage. Do we really want a level 3 charging station that close to a playground where unsupervised kids go? How about open areas or garages? Electrical inspections and grid requirements might be something to think about. I gave Rick Chelman a bunch of things that I did research on. I got them off the internet. I tried to find reliable sources. He can read through them if he chooses to, or give them to somebody else who might want to read them and decide if they'll be helpful for you. That's all I have to say. Thank you. I hope it helps.
Thank you.
You stuck to your 6 minutes.
Did I go over my 6
No,
minutes?
stuck to it.
Nope, you stuck to it.
I was watching. So there's something related to this. It's in the Methuen, and I've seen it online. There's a new couple of startups doing battery swap stations, because it gets around the problem of what do you do for the 30 minutes or 2 hours you need to charge your vehicle. So they have this, it's really clever. You come in, it's automated. Some of them are fully automated. I mean, you literally drive in, zip zap, the robots swap things out, and you're out of there quicker than you can fill a gas tank. Now, obviously, you have to have batteries that are compatible. So there's a tension in the industry trying to figure that out. Methuen basically treats them the same as level 3 chargers, which makes sense to me. But I think we ought to at least contemplate it, because if somebody wanted to bring one to Portsmouth, what do we call it? I mean, you know, we could just, in the definition, say it could include that.
Battery swap.
At some point, you could, it's a vehicle, so it's a service station, isn't it?
I mean, that sounds like
It's
a
service
maintenance,
station.
it's a maintenance function,
Yeah.
so it's a service station, really.
Well, they are charging those batteries on site, so there's, you know, and they're doing,
They're
they'll be
charging.
storing batteries, so there's some fire issues that the fire department may have some issues with.
But I have a lot of issues with the liability of robots doing that.
Well, yeah, that's.
Sorry. Maybe
Yeah.
it's the attorney in me, but there sounds like a lot of liability risk with that.
Yeah, well, the lithium fire is a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
And fire departments,
Yes,
that's a
Jim.
huge deal.
I'm trying to understand the economics of the level 3 charging stations, and does Portsmouth or any town foresee an explosion of these things once we have an ordinance, or has economics inhibited level 3 on their own? Like, will investors build these things on their own? Do they need subsidies from the Volkswagen settlement? It's pretty confusing to me why there's so few levels 3s.
I think it's an economic question. I think you put your finger on it, because when I did some checking, it's not only the issue of getting them in, it's then maintaining them. My brother and sister-in-law have electric vehicles, and my brother's he's a car guy, and so he's familiar with going around. Same thing that we've heard from other people. It's very common to go up to a charging station that's not working, because they just aren't being maintained the way. Tesla is the gold standard. Everybody says that. They maintain everything top drawer. They had it right from the beginning. They always work. So there's a whole bunch of tech issues there, but yeah, I think there may need to be some additional subsidies to get these things rolling.
Because it just doesn't make sense to me. There's obviously a phenomenal demand for level 3, yet they're not available. So that obviously raises a flag for me, saying, obviously they're not making money. And if they're not making money, that means subsidies. And subsidies means red tape and a lot of work. So I'm just trying to foresee, once we pass this, do we expect an explosion of level 3s in Portsmouth?
Well, I had Peter ask Methuen.
Right, I talked to one of the planners in Methuen, and their ordinance, I think, is 14 years old. And I called and left a message, and then he called me back and said, I had to go back and look at it because we've never used it, basically. And they have, on their municipal properties, they have a couple level 2 chargers. But he did say they do have a grant to install some, I think, 2 stations with 4 ports at a park and ride in Methuen, and those are going to be level 3. But he did say that they got a grant to get them, but really in 14 years, they haven't.
And the city has already applied and is supposed to be getting some funds to go towards chargers, because we did it. I can't remember the details because it was some time ago that I remember reading it, but it was through the RPC. It was one of the DOT, I want to say it was one of the admissions grants. I can't remember the name of it.
CMAQ?
Might be, I can't remember, but and the problem was the state held off on releasing any of those because they're looking for more direction. So once that direction to the DOT happens, then, and it funnels down and some of this money actually starts going out, you might see municipalities actually start to build a few more. But it is a cost. It's a very high cost.
I think that
last year,
brings us back to the accessory. I think that's why we're seeing them as accessory uses, to bring just another amenity on site to get customers on site, as opposed to a principle where all you do is charge. And one of the concerns that I saw also raised, and it occurred to me looking at some of these sites online that have been built, some of them are in the middle of nowhere. And I don't know that I'd want to send somebody, you want to go get your car charged tonight at 10 o'clock by yourself out in the middle of the prairie? Maybe not, if there's nothing else there. So it makes sense to me as in conjunction with other uses, as opposed to just being isolated, but,
Last year, I attended an event at New Hampshire Motor Speedway about EVs. And we heard from that group that Councilor Denton spoke about with the
Electrify
Volkswagen.
America.
Electrify America with the Volkswagen settlement money. And the goal is to establish a EV charging infrastructure along the interstates. So, we have I-95 right through the heart of Portsmouth, so, I would expect that. What Jim's question was like an explosion of them. I don't know if there'd be an explosion of level 3. It's costly, the
I happen to-
transformers, the infrastructure.
I'm kind of surprised
Has
that
to be
liquor stores haven't put
monetized.
them in.
Well, like the C&J Truro, the parking right out there isn't one there.
Right.
Anywhere.
Well, if these car manufacturers want to sell their cars, they'll put them in. They'll put them in. They'll have to. Or people won't buy their cars.
Well, that's
I mean,
why
when
Tesla
people
put
take
them
a
in.
bus, I've got a guy at my office that has a Tesla, and he can't leave it out in the cold and go away for 6 or 7 days. It'll be dead. So he's always running an extension cord to one of my outdoor outlets. So if you're going to go to park and ride,
I was heartened to hear that that one in Kittery is quiet, because despite what Liz said about cold weather, what I was reading, in cold weather, some make more noise because they have to get the battery system warmed up enough to charge it. So this is, again, a technology thing that we talked about earlier. It could be that Kittery has the current tech that doesn't make the sound, or they've insulated it enough. They figured a way to, to do it.
Liz's suggestion here was kind of interesting, because I looked it up as an example of 65 decibels. Normal conversation.
Yeah, supposedly 62 decibels is a normal conversation.
But 70 is busy traffic. So it's pretty close to.
Well,
It's
busy
a lot-
traffic on like a 2-lane
Yeah.
road, not
Yeah,
like
yeah, not
a
highway,
4-lane,
not I-95.
8-line
Not
highway.
I-95.
Decibels aren't a linear scale, it's a
We're about-
logarithmic scale.
We're running about 60 in this room right now,
Yeah.
decibels.
Normal conversation.
So 45 is the number I guess we should be looking at, because that's the low number.
Exactly.
That's at night in residential districts, which I don't want people sitting outside my bedroom window having a conversation that
So
loud. So,
Oh, that'll keep you awake.
Are these 24-hour use, is that
right.
part of the conditions would be the hours of operation?
Well, these things hum no matter what, right?
Yeah,
You
there's
can't
a-
shut them off.
That's something we need to find out. Is it different when it's being charged, like, as Bill experienced, it was very quiet, or, do they hum all the time? Because I know big transformers generally hum all the time.
You can't shut them off.
No.
It's like a power generation station. Yes, Bill?
So does the Department of Public Works have any expertise in this area?
Yeah. Yeah, there are staff members who are researching this. I know that we've brought extra power to the garage in hopes of charging stations eventually, additional ones, that
In the
is.
Bridge Street lot.
Yeah, Bridge Street lot will happen first, but I don't want to, to be honest.
There's some political issues.
Yeah, there are issues.
There was, I just saw in this morning's news, there's one of the Buy America requirements has caused a problem with some of the components that are required for these things.
Yeah.
And I believe the White House found a way around it, and anyway, it's a mess in Washington like many things. So there are political reasons why this is problematic at the moment, but I can't believe those will last forever.
One of the things Liz brought up, which I found very interesting, is the lack of regulation in New Hampshire for selling power. And I don't know about New Hampshire, but I know about Maine because we run a marina. And I can't change the rate of what we charge to sell to the 81 slips and without becoming a utility, which is a nightmare. So we can't so we have to literally pass through the electric bill to 81 slips as a pass-through. And if we charged a penny, we'd be a public utility, and you just don't go there. So how do they drop a charger that you put your credit card in without being a public utility?
That's a great point, Greg. That was going to be my follow-up question. It's like, obviously, the power you get from a level 3 is a lot more valuable because it's faster. So I would expect you'd be able to get more money at a fast charger for the electricity.
Heck yeah.
Based on what Greg just said, no. You have to be, you can't jack the price for that convenience.
Well, that's in the People's Republic of Maine, so I don't know what it's like here.
What if you're buying it directly from the utility,
Well,
though?
whoever's been to that one in Kittery, what's its purpose? Who put it in, and what does it charge, and who?
It's Electrify America. I think that's
Electrify
part
Oh,
of
so
the.
they use the grant money?
Yeah.
Now, do you have to put a credit card in and pay for it, or?
Yes.
Many of them are app-based,
Yeah.
so you use your phone.
You can use a credit card, but it's an app-based.
Okay.
And the rates are
It'll,
posted right
it'll
on it.
know when your car pulls in.
You have to remember what the rates were?
Like the
Okay.
bell on the door of a store?
The other important thing that Liz raised,
It equates to about the same as a tank of gas.
Well, that's what I keep reading.
Yeah. I don't remember the specific rate.
That's a bad parking job, by the way.
It's completely illegal.
Oh, that's Kittery. That's Kittery? Okay, thank you. That thing looks like a shipping container behind it.
Yes, it does.
Shipping container with,
It's as big as a shipping
It
container.
is.
and the transformers are outside that.
Oh, yeah.
contained area.
Wow.
That's, the containers where the bodies are buried.
Wow.
Yes, Jim?
The other item that Liz brought up, I think is overlooked, is that you can't automatically assume that the electrical grid can take all these chargers. You know, the poles and the substations all have to be coordinated. You just can't assume that I want a level 3 here and it's gonna work. The utility may have to upgrade wires for miles, I don't know. So, that's another complicating factor on when you start
But,
looking
you
at
know,
power
it-
demand.
Well, we can address whether or not, from a land use perspective, it's something that should be permitted.
Yeah.
Now, getting the infrastructure to it,
That's up
It's
to
not
the
our
purchaser.
that's another,
That's up to
that's
the
kind of
purchaser.
above our pay grade.
Yeah, it's not our job.
But it's something that people have to realize.
Yes,
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've heard downtown Portsmouth has serious power grid supply
Very
problems.
serious.
Very serious.
Maybe one day that won't be the case, but right now it is.
Until Mr. McNabb pays to upgrade the whole city, it will be.
So we've sort of settled the accessory use with levels 1 and 2, no principal use on levels 1 and 2. Principal use for level 3 with battery exchange would be the same where we allow service stations today.
Just where our service stations are allowed today.
Conditional use permit instead of special exception? Think about
I'm-
it,
I'm-
think about
I
it.
think we could really dictate what we want
I
those
like
conditions
conditional
to
use
be.
permit better.
I do,
Should we,
because they're going to come before the planning board anyway.
should we
so.
propose changing service stations to conditional use permit at the same time, so it's all consistent? So if you propose a conventional gas station, it would be the same?
What about existing, I'm thinking of on Islington Street, everyone knows the service station on Islington Street.
There's two of them.
Right? Yeah, the one that's still up and running and,
We were
sale.
still up and running.
no,
It's
There's
for
a
sale.
Sunoco and a mobile.
Yeah, that's right. There used to be
so
three.
I'm talking, for example, I will just, I don't like to use, business names for examples, but Davies Tire on Islington Street. All of this is vehicle related, and if they are servicing vehicles or any service station that currently exists, you can name 20 of them in the city. And they're simply keeping up with vehicle technology. Is there additional language we have to consider in all of this? They exist. They already have car batteries. They have fuels. They
So
have oils.
pre-existing use, do you want to add an EV charger to it?
That's,
It's still accessory use.
Yep, accessory to a
It'd be an
principal
accessory
use.
use.
Accessory
Still
to a
accessory,
principal use.
that's true.
So it's already allowed.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good question, but I think we're okay.
Okay.
So, back to my point, do we want to have conditional use permit instead of special exception, which means planning board instead of ZBA for EVs? Yes, or?
Yes,
I
I
think-
am.
Yeah.
I think the conditions are kind of coming to mind.
We have to work on those. We have to get those fleshed out.
Yeah.
And if we do that, then should we propose changing service stations to be the same thing, conditional use permit, not special exception? Because right now, it's special exception. For consistency, I would think we'd want to, but not my decision.
Do we have any pre-existing non-conforming?
Oh, all over the city.
Like that would
P-O-R-T-S-M-O-U-T-H.
potentially look to add something like this? And is there any rules for pre-existing non-conforming where they cannot?
We don't have a whole lot of new gas stations going in, but I would say the Common Man that I spoke about would be the first one in a long time
Well,
that
wouldn't,
I've seen
well,
come across the
actually
city.
though, but for what Paul just said, wouldn't there's always that, you can't expand an existing
Yeah,
non-conforming
you can't
use.
expand, you
You
can't
can't.
expand
Just
pre-existing.
can't do anything
Yeah,
different with it.
you can't expand a non-conforming existing.
Right.
Correct. Pretty much can't do anything with non-conforming without permission.
So you'd have to come in front of somebody.
Yeah.
Which would include, if you had if we had a pre-existing non-conforming service station, you couldn't add an accessory use to it, because that'd be an expansion, right?
Right, we'd have to look at the specific conditions of why it's non-conforming.
I would definitely take level 3 accessory uses and be really careful about them in any sort of residential like mixed use.
I think they should only be in commercial.
I
I
agree.
say commercial and then conditional use if you want to put it in a mixed, because then at least you
But-
can take a look at it and see where it's
The
going.
tricky part would be if it's in a mixed use, put a
The big
distance.
project that Joe was mentioning?
Yeah, like you want to put a distance from the, I mean.
That's
like-
why
like
conditional
one of-
use works then.
Yeah, one of the pictures even showed a sticker, a label on one of the transformers that says, don't be within 12 feet of this silly thing.
Well, a mixed use could have a parking structure, right? And level 3 within a parking structure might be
Like I said, I just
something
think,
you could conditional.
right, if it's a conditional use permit, I think we can then look at it, but I don't want it just be permitted
No, I agree. Conditional use is the way to go.
unless it's all commercial.
So if it were in a parking structure other than municipal, how would the board feel about that in the downtown?
I still think they need a conditional use permit so that
That-
people,
But I'm, the threshold of, because right now you can't do it, right? You
Wait,
can't-
on municipal property? Or
No.
no, in
private.
a,
or private property?
like Port Walk basement garage.
Yes, I mean, so like Nobles Island, they're adding a couple EV stations.
But are they level 3?
No.
There you go.
There you
So,
go. We're talking about level 3s.
But let's go way out on a limb here.
Right.
I'm not sure why the airport district is in our zoning, other than.
Right, I have comments about that.
Okay, but
But-
there's thousands of garage parking spaces at Lonza, and those are the people that would throw a level 3 in a garage in a heartbeat.
Let 'em.
And
That's
there's probably enough
commercial.
power out there too, right?
On that side, yeah. Yeah.
What did you want to say about?
The comment about P's is, I talked to Mike Mates today because we shouldn't be, and we probably can't propose any changes to their uses. I mean, that would have to be the PDA board. So this whole section 10.450, we should just not, we should say the PDA has to make.
can make a separate-
We can make a
separate
recommendation.
recommendation.
We can make a
The council could make a
recommendation.
recommendation to the PDA to consider adding these, but he said they wouldn't want them as a principal use anyway.
But accessory use, they should be permitted.
Right, but
Did he have?
they
any-
would have to make those changes.
Did he have any reasons why they didn't like him as a principal use?
He didn't say, but I
Same
think
reason they won't allow gas stations out there.
probably.
The gas station that that
Right.
was there at the corner, Danny Plummer was trying to turn it into a new service station for years, and I talked to him at length about it. He actually tried to sell me the site, because it's such a mess.
Okay, well, I think we've made some good progress on EVs. Little homework to do.
Well, I think if we do this right, we can just knock out level 3 at our next meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I think
Maybe we can work
we'll
and
work on
revise
some
this
details. Get some,
and get some criteria for,
I'll read my homework, thank you.
And take the confusing P's point out, because that threw me off.
right.
That
So,
can just be a separate recommendation, just that they advise.
It's a communication.
We can just advise them. to
the other,
try-
the other important thing that, not details, but the solar, we have been asked to have a meeting, joint meeting with HTC, which coincidentally, I asked for before I knew about that same morning. I think it's a good idea for us to get together and talk. You know, we have one member who chaired the HTC for a long time, and so he knows the HTC a lot better than any of the rest of us. I did meet with Reagan Rudig, who chairs it, and Manager Connor. We had a good meeting last week or whenever, it seems like a year ago, but there's so much going on, I think it was last week. And they're all for having a joint meeting. Now the schedule part.
That's why I opened my calendar.
Reagan suggested February 14th, which is Valentine's Day.
I already might have an RPC meeting that night too that I don't know about.
So I told her that I didn't think that would work, but that I would mention it.
Thank you
So-
for mentioning it.
What other dates do we have? And part of it's.
If she wants a Wednesday, why not the 7th?
She picked it, that
That's
date
their
was
regular
picked
meeting.
because that's a
Their
regular
regular meeting
meeting,
is the
and they don't
7th.
have anything else scheduled that night, so. But they're willing to have a special meeting just as we can have a special meeting.
So their second meeting would have been the 14th. I see what you're saying.
Right. That,
Right.
that's how it was picked. There was no great mystical science to it.
So the 21st is a possibility. If we're looking at Wednesdays, right?
So because there's a holiday on the Monday, the council meeting is on Tuesday, the
Tuesday.
20th, and that kicks the zoning board meeting to the 21st. We could certainly meet in conference room A.
I see.
Yeah, it'll
I don't know if
likely be a
there'd be enough
special meeting
room.
for both boards.
Right.
That's what it's, that's.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be.
Our work session in February, we're going to have
It's city council and planning
City
board.
Council and Planning Board,
So-
a report back on the housing groups that are going on right now.
Portsmouth Listen Circles.
So February 22nd, we'll have a 6 o'clock meeting. We could certainly meet after, or we could look for the 21st in the conference room.
Well, what about the 13th? We have a special meeting the night before, but we could do the 13th.
The 13th, there's a school board meeting
board?
in the council chambers, but we
All
could,
right, we can skip that.
we
All
could
right.
do conference room
Just throwing dates out here.
Yeah, I mean, conference room A would be fine.
I think, yeah, as
Right,
long
I
as
mean,
there's
it's-
room enough. I mean,
A. Yep, there should be plenty.
so the
Well,
try
How
the
many
thir-
people are there? Because I gotta tell you, the entire council takes up that entire room, pretty much. as far
Community
as-
campus?
Or we could do the Levinson room at the library if that would be available too.
Good options.
That would be a nice
Have
change.
venues.
Could do a
Good
different venue.
options. Change of scenery.
So we have the ability now with community campus for YouTube as well, right?
I don't know. You work for
I'm
the
trying,
city. I don't.
I'm asking.
You
If
and
the
our
space is
facilities, are
there,
you
we could
not?
have a meeting there, yeah.
Yeah, and we'd have to record it.
Well, it doesn't matter because they can only do one live anyways.
That's right.
They can
That's
only
right.
do one live. Everything else has to be recorded and
That's
looked
right.
at later. It doesn't matter. Even if we were in conference room A, the same thing would happen.
Yeah.
So we can go wherever we want and just record it.
Is there a space out there that might work?
Yeah.
So what date are we talking
You
now?
said the 13th, you said.
I threw out the 13th, but if we could do.
No, I'm saying that without knowing the
21st.
schedule of the room. I mean, the room might be
Yeah,
scheduled.
give me,
Right.
so the 13th would be one, give me a couple of options so I can get back to Reagan.
Well, we talked about the 21st. we can't do it
213,
here, but-
221.
I think did we look at like Monday or Tuesday, the 26th or 27th?
I can't do
I
that
don't
until
I
March.
say we look at all those dates and see what works.
So,
I can just tell you what's not already planning board, city council.
the other folks, I guess in order, 213, 21, 26, 27?
Oh, when's February vacation?
For New Hampshire, that's probably the week of the 26th.
Yeah, that's problematic for people.
For
Yeah.
Maine, it's probably the week of the
Week before,
19th.
yeah.
Well, we're talking all New Hampshire residents here, or we better be.
Except me, but that doesn't matter.
That was a previous planning board.
Unless-
So, 213 and 21 then.
13, 21, yeah.
Should we,
Unless you want to try next week, which is,
I mean, you could try like, I know they're meeting on the 7th, but there's the 8th of February as well, which we don't have a meeting.
I don't know if we're going to solve this right here now. It sounds like this is.
Well,
I
if
just,
we
I
give
need
them
op-
enough
just need
dates, they can.
options, because I have to get back to Reagan.
Yep.
Right. But if they can at least have enough dates that are possibilities, then.
Sounds like we're pretty flexible, and 6 o'clock sound like, is it? to folks?
Yes.
Yep.
So we can get our,
Yep.
get out of here before it gets too late.
Yeah.
Okay, I will relay those, we'll get back. We'll work with staff to come up with a draft on EV, we'll kick that out pretty quick, it sounds like. Got to figure out the criteria for the conditional use permit aspects of it. Solar's probably going to be a little bit more of a
Heavy lift.
discussion, it's going to be more to talk
On
about.
on that note, Mr. Chairman, I believe that the purpose of this meeting is to make a recommendation
Correct.
to council, right?
Not tonight, but that's the
When
goal.
we have our
Yes.
The next one.
solar ordinance discussion, right?
Yes.
so, yeah.
It'd be great to try to keep everybody focused on that solar can be a debatable issue, people talking about climate change and all kinds of things and what people are passionate about. And I think it'd be a more efficient discussion if it were just focused on the recommendation.
Yeah.
Does this draft have definitions?
Which, the EV or the solar?
Yeah, for the EV.
Yes, it did.
This is the last page. It's page 3.
It will if it didn't. They might have.
It had the definitions that came with it.
Yeah.
For the,
It will be adding some others, like the battery swap, and making it clear about adding an accessory to an existing, service station, that sort of a thing. Just a clarification stuff. Anything else?
I don't want to extend the meeting any further, but what about dimensional requirements for any of this stuff? Does that,
Buffer zones,
I think
distances.
a little more research that'll inform that question.
Yeah.
Is there, what happens when you get over 6
Yeah.
level 3 charging stations? Does that kick things into, a whole
Different
other-
set of rules.
Right. So, that's a question. Good.
We could put a maximum number on a site for now.
Well, if we find out that, when you have 8 as opposed to 7, you need something the size of this building,
To power
that
it.
might be different than, yeah. So, good question. Don't know the answer yet.
Okay.
But we will. With that, I think we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
thank you.